What's up, everybody? How you doing? My man Brennan Hopkins is here to tell you about wood-fired pizza, and in between that, he's gonna sew in some almost invisible threads about email marketing.
That's exactly how I do it.
That's exactly how it's done. So, what's happening, man?
Oh, nothing much. It's very early here, 6 a.m. So that's pretty. Time zones always crack me up. Obviously, though, people could tell I'm American from my accent. But I did a little digital nomading a few years back, and then my wife and I ended up in Australia, where we live our small town beach life, drinking lots of coffee, eating lots of wood-fired pizza, and I fund that lifestyle by helping people make copious amounts of money via email marketing.
Exactly. You see how that works? Yeah. So, look, if you guys are tuning in, smash the like button or the love button. Smash it. Press it with your thumb. Press the blue thumb with your human-colored thumb. That's right.
Thumbception.
This is thumbception. This is all about engagement and interaction. You're never going to be a success, and you're going to have to run back home and live with mommy and daddy if you can't at least get out on the field of play and give Brennan and I some thumbs ups, some likes, some loves. Yeah, that's how go somewhere else if you want punches pulled.
I know. I was like, that's harsh and also true, though. So it is.
It's always interesting when people won't even bother to comment or it's like, okay, all right, maybe you probably need to come out of the shadows.
Probably need a different lead generation platform,
right? So whoever's here, say something. Whoever's on, I see you guys, but say something. Drop little thumbs ups, drop little hearts. You can drop little poop emojis. I really don't care.
You can.
Yeah,
I don't either.
You did some email marketing work for me, and I found that you captured my voice very, very well, which was delightful. It was wonderful. It was pleasant that happened. Let's start with that. Let's start with hey, Summer, what's your process, if any, for trying to capture other people's voices?
Well, I guess the biggest thing is I'm a pattern recognition type person. Not really. I'm not not when it comes to I don't have an engineering mindset by any means, but I was homeschooled, so I was very socially awkward. And the transition into my teen years was kind of a smack in the face socially. So I was still an extrovert and still wanted friends. So I started basically just standing back and observing how people behaved. So then I could pick up the things that seemed to be praised and stay away from the things that weren't kind of as much. So that basically built a framework of just observing people. And so, which you and I, we had the benefit. It's always easier. We kind of have been forming a friendship since the beginning of the year. So we've spoken multiple times. I've consumed a lot of your content. So I understand how and we have a lot of ideological agreements. So in some ways, I just add some swear words basically to things that I would already say.
That's great. I loved it. I think it's really funny. So the more that I sort of get into the world of the copywriting way of thinking, the more I like things that seem very simple on the surface, but require a massive amount of dedication to get good at. Sushi would be a great example of that, right? Right. The hundreds and hundreds of years of refinement to get to this thing that seems impossibly simple until you try it yourself.
I 100% agree with that. Is even in my own because so I'm hitting over 5 years, or around 5 years now, being a copywriter, and I almost had a freak out moment a couple months back. I had just launched some of my own stuff that I was selling, and I was looking at it and I'm like, this is too simple. Like, have I become a worse writer? And then I was reading it and I realized, no, actually, I did simultaneously. The external becomes more plain and more simple with the practice.
Yeah.
But what's going on in the background is way more involved.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
then it starts to happen a bit more intrinsically, rather than forced, that's probably one of the bigger problems with anyone trying to write for themselves or for another person, is overthinking it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, communication is actually the goal. And that means making things as simple and as straightforward. We're basically trying to eliminate any area for confusion or dissonance with what we're trying to say. That's what we're chasing, because clear communication is more persuasive than flowery words or a bunch of concepts that don't actually land.
Yeah, it's totally true. I can apply that over the journey I had from coming into this space and the kind of content I wrote and not understanding the medium to now.
Yeah.
Now I don't know how good or not good I am, but I know I can cut through and I can grab attention and I can shake people up and all those things. Do you find that there's anything idiosyncratic or specific to email that doesn't apply in other arenas of copywriting?
Yeah, so the cool thing about email is it's your own channel, so you have a lot more flexibility and freedom than you would maybe in other places. Now, your Facebook wall is probably going to be even more personable, so that there's a line, but I think it's more of the reception, the disposition of the recipients is different. So I think it's like 90% of people with an email account check it daily, which is insane because there's billions of people with an email account. And so if 90% of people are checking it daily, they're accustomed to receiving messages. And they're not upset to be receiving messages. That's why they have an email address.
Yeah.
Also, I think there's an aspect of mentally, when we log into our email, we're not guarded in the same way that we might be when we're on a social media platform. So when it comes to social media, we're there. Well, you and I aren't there, but a lot of people might be there for relaxing, for a fun time. And so that changes the way that you're going to have to cut through the noise. Whereas the disposition of someone when they're in their inbox is more, if you can get their attention, you win. Or at least that's the first thing, because they're already primed to hear from you because of the space that they're in. You just have to kind of be you have to get them to click on you over the other people, or instead of just deleting you. That's the main goal.
So this is a great object lesson in what we were just saying a minute ago about how it looks very simple, but there's a lot of thought. And it's like there's this inverse relationship. The more thought goes into it, the more you can finally create this thing of real elegance and simplicity that has effectiveness.
Yeah.
For me, it was a kind of I guess an aha moment, or like a wow moment, when I started realizing you really have to think of each channel differently that you communicate with people on. Because the idea is that you want, and this is like, guys, pay attention here, take notes. This isn't marketing, but it's a cornerstone of marketing mentality. You have to be able to think of where the person is, like in their head, on Facebook. We come into it with one set of sort of expectations, filters, whatever.
Yeah.
In email, different. In Messenger, different. I think that's why so many people don't like uninvited cold outreach in Messenger. We feel like it's a little bit like, okay, if you spam me on Facebook, that's the equivalent of knocking on my door and trying to sell me something. But if you spam me in Messenger, it's like knocking on the door and then stepping inside uninvited and trying to sell me something.
Yeah.
You know? It's different. It feels different. And so the better that we can do this cognitive work, this conceptual work in our heads, the better our writing will then be. I really like that. So,
and I'd say that there's some overlap, you know, like you can whenever I do between my email to my Facebook to LinkedIn for myself, I can pretty much always keep the same message in 60 to 80% of what I've written. So it's not so much the if there's character restrictions, that's one thing, but it's not so much that I have to completely change my message. It's going to be just optimizing it for whatever it's at. So how I can intro something onto my email list, where when they subscribe to me, I can be a lot, I don't have to, if they open my email, I don't have to worry as much about them trying to grab their attention with the first line, because I know that they already know, like, and trust me. So they're going to probably give me at least a few sentences so I can be a bit more, I can ease in. Whereas like on Facebook, I have to create kind of like some sort of punch immediately because they're scrolling through the news feed. And so I probably more change up the intro based off of the platform, but the meat of whatever post that I'm making or whatever content I'm writing, that doesn't have to change. So you don't actually have to write 3 different things for 3 different platforms. Just take the extra 5 to 10 minutes after you've written it to optimize for whatever channel that you're writing on, basically.
So, where'd you go? There you are. That brings me to something that I am fascinated by within copywriting is headlines. Yeah. Headlines. Talk to me about headlines. I'm gonna let you, as the copywriting guy, tell me stuff.
So it's very funny. There's a lot of, everyone's got an opinion on them. I think the base concept is we're trying to grab an attention. The way you typically do that is by breaking the ice and also promising I'd say usually big promise plus big benefit is basically the base of any good headline. Or you can also do curiosity, I guess. If we're doing subject lines are a little different. You can do curiosity, but you think of it, I don't know which famous marketer it was. I can't remember, one of the old school guys that's no longer with us, but he was saying, that your headline will do 90% basically of your work. So
like that might have been Dan Kennedy.
Yeah, I can't remember honestly which one might have been him.
Before, though. Yeah.
But yeah, he said it's like after you finish writing your headline, you've finished 90% of your work. And that's just because of how important that it is. But basically, we look more to human behavior. And honestly, no one does this better than tabloids, because people are walking by and you're just like, holy crap, what? Queen Elizabeth is an alien. We just...
Totally.
We can't help it. We can't help it.
Baby wins lottery.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like that sensational stuff. And even just other magazines do that type of stuff too. When they're like, they're like 7 never before seen sex tips that will make him crazy.
Yeah.
And we're just like, whoa, well, what's actually happening in that? If you zoom out, I guess it's really cool, because if you just start paying attention to what catches your eye, then you can take a minute and analyze it. And then you can just start replicating it. You're just like, 7. Okay, people love numbers. We are like definitiveness. We don't like ambiguity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really, it's like, they're just these things that then it links to the promise as well. New. Okay, well, that's great. We could use a refresh. People love new things.
Yeah.
Never before seen. Oh man, it just enhances that. But it's basically like, it's the kind of, it's not so much scarcity, but as far as it's unique still, because this isn't common knowledge, so it's special. So we feel like special because we're getting inside knowledge. And then you just go down the list and look at all of the things that we're emotionally responding to. And then you can replicate that, which is like, for me as an email marketer, it varies, but it's basically like, I can pretty much, I can, what's a headline? One of the headlines kind of is, I'm like, what would I say for my own thing? But it's more like, uncover 15% or more in monthly revenue that you weren't making before without doing any extra work. Like that's the type of thing. And people, there's like the benefit to them immediately, and then a tease about how it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And there you go.
So what about, you obviously can't do, like, I can't remember the formula, but anyway, you can't do a formula like that in a headline for an email.
Correct. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit, how do you approach email headlines?
Yeah, there's 2 main goals with an email headline, So the subject is you're trying to get the open, first of all, but then a lot of people talk about that and then don't talk about the second thing. I mean, people do talk about it, but not as much, which is ensure that there's not too much dissonance between what the subject line was and what the email body contains.
Yeah.
And so, because that's why we have the phrase clickbait, because you're like, I clicked on that and then it wasn't related at all.
Yeah.
And so I could easily get crazy open rates, but as we are logical and emotional beings. And so when we click on one thing, we are expecting something. And then if there isn't at least enough reference in what we're currently consuming, then we have a lot of dissonance, and then we're out basically.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I didn't agree to this. It was like I didn't give consent for this. Basically,
totally.
is how we feel. So there's a couple things. If I use curiosity, which is great, I like to do something to where I basically have this vision in my head to where I'm like 1 degree removed from what the subject is how I like to go for curiosity to change it up. So obviously you can use directly what you're referring to, or if you can tie your curiosity to something that is more out of the blue, that people are like, what does this mean? But then it's only like 1 degree apart from what you're talking about. So when they click in, they can make the conclusion, they can make the attachment themselves.
Yeah.
That performs really well because you stand out quite a lot in comparison to other emails. Like for years, I think one of the email lines we did for one of the promotions was like, this advice is BS or whatever, Yeah. And that's not something that people are seeing in their inbox. And it was given that you're a coach, helping them, or given that you're helping them like cut through all the BS that's out there, like that made sense for them. So they're not like opening it up and then mad that we were ultimately that we were giving them better advice.
Right. Yeah. I see a lot of people attempt that sort of like the shock and awe headlines and then not know how to weave it in.
Yeah.
And then I also see, I think the funniest is the people who are moderately strong writers. They understand on some level that the shock and awe type headlines get open rates.
Yeah.
And then they'll try to weave it into their example, and good writers can do it and bad writers fail miserably. But the ones that are the most entertaining to me are the ones in the middle. You can see as you read that they're working for it, but
they're trying so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's
my biggest headline open rate, my biggest rate of open from a headline was monkey flings poo, what happens next?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I couldn't stitch it in. I couldn't find a way to make it metaphorical to the point of the email. So got a ton of opens, but nothing happened.
Yeah. And that's the cool thing is eventually, you can figure out ways to still tie that in. Like you could actually, if you wanted, you could just call that out immediately.
Yeah.
You'd be like, okay, I have to be honest with you. This has nothing to do with that, but I thought of it and it was too funny to not share.
Exactly.
Okay. Some people will go immediately. That's fine. But there are people that will then be with you in that mental transition, and then they'll stick with you and they'll be okay to to receive.
Yeah.
But it's very much like, we're not trying to, I think a lot of marketers almost talk about kind of like lulling people into a false sense of security.
Sure.
And I get that, but it's more than that, because when you're in a false sense of security and then you're confronted with something, your reaction is actually to push back.
Yeah.
It's a negative response when you are in that space and you don't hear what you are expecting.
Yeah.
However, if you like every good comedian, basically, if you can say some pretty intense truths in or get away with that and provoke a lot of thought. And that's not because they're not putting them in a false sense of security. They're creating an environment that's safe for them to be able to hear that, to where, and it's presented in a way to where they let it be confronting from themselves, not from the external party. I guess that's kind of really what it is like a lot of marketing out there tries to force the impact, whereas you're trying to draw the impact out from them.
Yeah. You brought up comedians, and I think that that's an interesting direction to go for a minute. What role what role, I guess, do you feel that comedy has or can have on good copywriting and good marketing?
Oh, I mean, I think it's huge. So I will say that it is dependent on the brand. So obviously there's like, if your brand isn't like, if you've got a high I don't know, if you're just, I think about like all the, I'm thinking about like Rolls Royce or whatever, or even like the very tight ass men gurus that are like, rah, rah, go kill a bear. Those types of people, then humor is displayed differently, but they wouldn't be lighthearted necessarily in the same way, because that would actually go against the whole brand image.
Right.
But they can still leverage humor kind of in like a sarcastic or in like a we're better than you way that people would resonate with. But for the average person, you got to think about who you're talking to, which is people just like you.
Yeah.
And reality is we want authenticity. We want to know that this person understands us. Even it's crazy because you can see how the trends have changed in recent years to where authority is barely even a weight. It doesn't carry the same weight with it because people have been burned too much now, and because of social media we can learn about that, and so we can see that. So authority doesn't even, like credentials, I guess that's what it is. Credentials.
Yeah, credentials.
Although authority matters. Sorry, credentials. Yeah, that's
not manufactured external authority.
Correct. Perceived. It's really perceived authority, honestly. Yeah. But so credentials aren't in. They can help still. They're still powerful. But you could actually promote things solely based on the credentials. That's no longer an option anymore because people are way too built. They're too resistant to that. So humor is one of the most powerful ways to cut through that kind of concern. And so I think it's so funny. I like to think about kind of how when we had some family growing up that we didn't see very much, and occasionally they would come around, for not very often. And it was like palpable tension when they came around. We loved them, but we just didn't see them. So then it was like awkward to try and connect, and then they're in our house.
Yeah.
But then like our dog would come in, Bandit, and he would just be so happy to see people, and it would immediately break the ice and cut the tension in the room. And all of a sudden the focus was removed from like, we haven't seen each other, to then put on something that we all enjoyed together. And then that would facilitate ways for conversation to just open up and flow naturally.
Interesting. Yeah, totally.
And humor does that so much in our things because we don't have the benefit of being able to relate always, like in a video call like this, or you might really wonder about what kind of person is this? Do I actually trust them? But then if they're willing to throw some humor out there, they must not take themselves too seriously.
Yeah. The time has flown.
It has, I know.
What, like, I know it's kind of a cliche at this point with thousands of interviews done probably monthly, but what would you leave people with? What's the thing that you'd want people to understand about, I'd say more so copywriting in general? Like what could you give the average coach whose presence on social media, their content game is so that could help them?
Yeah. Well, if I can pause really quick first, thanks. Since I came on to talk about email, I'm a copywriter as well. I didn't mention that. But yeah, that was how I started. Is I highly recommend that anyone that has any sort of following at this point, make sure that they take some time to set up their own email list and some email marketing things. It doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to necessarily get rich off of it now. However, it's the type of thing that will pay dividends down the road. And if you have this, I'm always anxious whenever I don't want to be like, you have to have one, because everyone's situation is different. However, it is one of the most valuable assets that you can have. You might not have space for it right now, but it's top 3 to 5 in priority for building a healthy business. So it's not something you want to neglect for a super long time. And there are ways that you can set up automated things that help nurture the relationship with the client. There are ways that you can contact them if they visit your website page and then leave, like so many things like that. So people can feel free to ping me and reach out if they have any questions about that. And then also want to be sending people content 2 to 3 times a week minimum, basically. And you can just rehash what you're using on your Facebook profile, just spend an extra few minutes to make it email friendly.
Yeah.
That being said, like I said, well, I'm working with a kind of like a Bitcoin investment coach, and his list is really huge, and we get about 8,000-ish people, anywhere from 7,000 to 8,000 people to open any given email. And we promote his webinars through those. And I know his last thing that he did, I think it was 90%. It was somewhere, I think it was over 80. I can't remember the exact numbers and I couldn't pull it up fast enough, but like he gave a presentation and 80% of the sales came from the email follow-ups after the webinar.
Yeah.
And this was a 5-figure amount when all those people came in. So, and on a recurring payment plan. So it was like 6 figures that basically he had made for his business, and he wouldn't have captured the majority of those if he hadn't taken the time to set up some sort of work. Well, he got me to set them up for him, but if we hadn't set up a follow-up thing. So I want to say that just really quick, because it's the least sexy and most boring thing, one of those, but it's also one of the things that will actually contribute to building a long-term business.
Man, the whole topic of the unsexy work that actually pays the money.
Yes.
Like, I feel like I'm shouting about that all the time. I want everybody to understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was that. And as far as copy, I'd so much more. It's like, don't try hard to understand your ideal market, and then don't try hard when you're writing.
Yeah, totally. Like, give it a lot of thought and study and focus ahead of time, and then sort of just speak to them, right?
Yes, that's it. Because people are busy, people are living their own lives. You crafting, especially on a social media platform, people aren't going to remember that really past, if you're lucky, 2 days. Yeah. If you're lucky, like that's high. So definitely don't need to invest you don't need to be spending days for these types of things when you being present is actually your biggest asset. So just find what people actually care about, and then just talk about that.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, shoot. Thank you for jumping on, Brennan.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And you and I will be talking again soon on business matters.
I know.
Yeah. So
exactly.
Okay. Cool, brother. Thank you so much, man. I think I just gotta go take a rest. It's getting to the middle of the afternoon.
It's so much.
And I'm a nap kind of guy. Like all geniuses, I take naps.
They are. It's great. Well, thanks for having me. We'll chat soon.
Okay, buddy.
All right. Cheers, man.
Bye.